everyone, and welcome to another episode of Good Morning Enablement. The subject matter today, the topic today with my wonderful colleague and co-founder, Roger Jennings, is about how do we set up an activation for success in a sales kickoff environment. And one of the activations that we have done numerous times, we're going to talk about it in detail, is setting up an employee professional photo booth. So that's what we'd like to dive into now. We're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And most importantly, we're going to tell you what to do if everything goes out of control, or in better words, something like, if the S hits the fan. Roger will tell you what you can do to get yourself out of those situations. So, Roger, let's just talk about that. So first and foremostly, what does that mean to have a photo booth at Sales Kickoff? What is it? What does it mean?
Sure. Well, this was something I think the first one we did could have been even 7 years back in time. And LinkedIn was becoming a really popular site, and still is, of course. And people wanted to have their nice photos. Today, of course, you can do AI and make whatever you want. But back in the day, you'd need to have a nice photo, and you'd have to spend money to have it taken, or, just get an amateur one from somebody. So as a sort of thank you to the attendees of sales kickoffs, we set up a booth, and we would take their photos, and we would have professional lighting, and we'd have professional gear, because back at the time, my team was all video production. And of course, we can also do photo. And a lot of people on the team would do wedding photos and event photos and all that. So it was a no-brainer. So let's set this thing up and offer it out to the employees.
Okay, so let me just recap on that. So having a photo booth at Sales Kickoff was to give a free set of professional photographs as a thank you to the employees, so they didn't have to go and spend, $100 to $300 or pounds on creating their own professional photograph that they might have to have internally in their company systems or externally on LinkedIn. Okay, good, got it. So can you tell me about how do you go about that, Roger? What do you do? What do you do?
Well, going into it, first time round, you don't think it's a big deal at all, and you rent the gear. As video folks, we didn't have the strobes that we would want, for a photo session. So you rent the gear and you put together your plan of action. And for the folks out in the audience who are thinking, "Oh, photo booth, I want to do this," some of the things you need to consider is, at least at our event, people need to be attending sessions. So a challenge is you can only offer the photo booth during breakfast, lunch, and breaks, let's say. We never did any in dinner because our team was, by the end of the day, we needed to eat some dinner. But you have a limited time frame to do this in.
Right.
And can you schedule it out? Do you inform people? First time through, we just used signage to let people know that this was happening. And first time through, I'm guessing maybe it was 700 people or something like that we did. And that was over a period of probably 3 or 4 days. But it was busy, and it was just a word of mouth thing. And it was light in the beginning, and it got really busy at the end because people were saying, "Oh, you guys are doing some great photos. This is neat. I want my free photo." So it was growing. It was growing.
Very cool. I want to double click down on something. So, all right, obviously I was part of it, but I want to tease it out for our
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah.
So 700 people is a lot of people to take photographs for over 4 days. And what I heard you say, just validating that, you were doing half an hour before breakfast, half an hour for the first break, an hour for lunch, half an hour at the second break. And I think you normally did like half an hour at the end of all of the sessions in between people going to dinner. That's not a lot of time to get, all right, 4 days, that's maybe like 5 or 6 hours across the 4 days. That's not a lot of time to photograph 700 people. So what kind of process did you put in place? Well, first, how did you set it up? Where were you taking the photographs? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing. So when you're working with the event folks, the people setting up the event, you need to request a space, and you want a nice large space. I don't remember how big our spaces were. Let's just pretend it was like a 20 by 40-foot space, maybe something like that. Because you
Right.
need to have room to set up your backdrop and your equipment. And then you need to have an area for people to funnel in. So, A, you need to have a large space. Now, the events people are going to want to put you far away from the event because the close real estate is valuable. Of course, it's valuable. But if this is a project supported by management and they want it to be successful, it's got to be in a prime location so that as people get out of a session, they can walk over and get their photo. If they're going to have to cross the convention center or the hotel, it's not going to happen. So logistically, you've got to get a good place locked down. Now,
Yeah,
as we did this, and I don't know if I answered your question, but that the
you did.
location's the
You
first
did.
thing. As we did this the second year, we realized that we probably should have two photographers.
Why?
Well, because with two photographers, you can do twice the amount of work. Now, this isn't like video where you can't have, crosstalk from one video to the other. And it's not like video where lighting from one will affect the other one. So having, two photographers with flashes going off in the same room wasn't anything to worry about. But we decided that we're going to double our output and do that. Now, as this project became popular, one of the things that started to become a problem was that people would start lining up, down the hallway at the convention center. And we didn't get pushback, I don't think, till the third time. But, it was something where we learned, okay, now what we need to do is we need to have the little poles with the, like,
Stanchions.
yeah,
Yeah,
stanchions like at the movie theater. So we needed
yeah.
to start to plan for that so that we could route people in. And to try and speed people through, we decided to put together a signage that showed this is what your photo could look like against the blue background. This is what it could look like against the pink background. Um, these are different ways you can pose. So we started to have materials out so that as people are lined up and starting to walk in, you could do that. And then we had some volunteers by that point who would say, oh, which background do you want? Take a look at this. So that way, when you get up to the front, you'll know what to do. Now, this is where we get close to where the blank hits the fan moment,
Yeah.
is that with the volume of people, we were having people fill out a little card with their name and email. Now, the blank hits the fan moment happened when we got back to the office and we're trying to distribute the photos. And there's an old saying: if you're doing a group photo, if you cannot see the camera cannot see you.
Yeah.
That's analogous to if you're requesting something and you're writing your email address down, if it's not legible, the person who's going to try and send you your item is not going to be able to read it, and you're not going to get it.
Right.
So that was a big problem that made the project last a very much longer time after we got back to the office. And we solved it for the next time, which I'm sure you're going to ask me about. The other thing was, a straight up front, we just told people that we're taking your photos. You'll get all of the photos, even the ones with your eyes closed, and we're not going to do any editing. There was just no way that with that quantity of photos for free, we could do that. So we just let people know in advance there's not going to be any editing. You're just going to get everything.
Okay, let me just tease out some of the key points that you said. How do you set that up? Well, first of all, what I heard you say is like a big space. So like a meeting room where you would normally train in. So quite a big space, maybe 30 foot by 30 foot, something like that, is what you need, because you need to have some area at the front to people to wait, getting ready, and you need to have your photography area set up. And if you're going to do two photographers, then you're going to split the back so you can have two rows of people coming in. Heard that. Fantastic. I think everyone got that. I heard you tease in there that over time you became more sophisticated in setting the individual up for success.
Yes.
And some of that included, okay, we're going to send out promotional materials so you know what to do, where to show up, how to do it. We're going to send you examples so you know what color background you want. And when you have two, that was easy. One's one color,
Yep.
one's the other, and they can
Yep.
choose.
Yep.
And number three, having extra people work in the booth with you help to filter the people in, through, and out quicker. That's what I
Yep.
heard you say.
Yep.
And last but not least, which is one of the most important things, was setting an expectation with the individuals that no, you do not get to stand here with the photographer and go through your photographs and pick the right one and ask for Photoshop to be edited, because the service that we were providing is we're going to take 15 fantastic pictures. In them, you know, 3 or 4 you might not like, so you get to take all of them and choose. And
Yep.
that's how, you know. And
Yep.
the other thing that I know that we did was, I think it was within 20 days of the event finishing, we deleted every photograph. It was like, you
Yeah.
pick it up at this point or we're going to remove it, because there's no point storing, you know, 715 photos. That's a lot of storage for no reason. Okay, so all sounds fantastic. I'm going to double click down on one thing. You said you used the cards to know whose photograph it was, of where to send them in the email or the upload. And I know that we tried several different ways. One of them was having them hold up the badge for the first photograph, which worked, but it was still labor intensive.
Sure.
I know recently when we did something like this with a company who I shan't name.
You're skipping ahead 2 steps.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'll stop there. But there's a really great solution that you came up with.
Yeah,
And
you
we
all got
get
to listen to the end of the video to find that one out. But yeah, that's the creme de la creme. And from that shoot, you know, I already know what I want to do on my next one, because I have, you know, every time you do this, you evolve. And, you know, I'm able to pivot for the next one, but you also need to pivot in real time. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, when we had the blue and the pink background,
Yeah.
we had a problem because nobody wanted to be shot against the pink background.
And that was the best for certain
And
skin
that
tones.
was the
Yeah.
best, depending on your skin
It
tone.
looks really
Uh,
good.
it
Yeah.
looks good because we had 2 different colors. We're trying to be in the brand, but 2 different colors, because depending on your complexion, you're going to look better on one and not the other.
Yeah.
And our pivot was, one of the teams said, "Why don't we call it salmon instead?" And
I
as soon as
remember
we,
that.
yeah, as soon as we said, "Oh, would you like the pink?" I'm sorry, would you like the
Salmon.
salmon or the blue
Yeah.
background? Oh my gosh, the salmon was more popular.
You're so right. I remember that as well. Yeah, I do remember that. That's funny.
Yeah. Remember, the baseline here is we're doing this all internal, and we're in a sales enablement budget, and the money's gone to things like excellent keynote
Yeah.
speakers and entertainment. So really, we're just trying to do this as close to free as
Cost
possible,
efficient.
cost efficient. And
Yeah.
we're trying to figure this out, and we're looking at, okay, we did the name cards. Thought the name cards was great, because you go to the amusement park and they give you a little card, and
Yeah.
then you go pick up your photo. So it's like, this is in our mind, but having people write it down doesn't work. So the next year, and I think we've gotten up to around 1,500
Yeah.
photos or
Yep.
more by this point. The next year, again, we're trying to be frugal and do it yourself with tools. We now set the cameras to wirelessly tether, which means I take the photo and the photo is going to go to the computer, and you know, it's still backed up on the card, but it's going to go to the computer. And then what we would do, since this is a sales kickoff, is we would immediately have them go to a station, and we would copy their photos into their G drive or whatever the equivalent was. That way they had their photos right away after the event.
Instantly. Yeah.
But this was
Or you
still,
needed the volunteers, right? Like you had the people at the front stations. So you take the photo and they're like, right, you go over there and here's the card number. And then they just swiped them into their G drive and they were done.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think this was the evolution of the idea, and it was getting bigger, and how do we manage it? And we were throwing more people at the problem, which is solved in the last iteration of this. But I think, you know, we were doing what we thought was best. But this is our thought process. You can learn from it. And of course, if you've done something similar and have had different outcomes or better outcomes, share it in the comments. But the best one was the last one. Now, I'll be honest. for the photographers, this wasn't necessarily a fun project because you'd have a lot of downtime and then you'd have a lot of time where you're running a marathon.
Yeah.
It was a lot of stress,
Yeah.
and you're jumping around because you're short or tall compared to the person you're shooting. So
Yeah.
you're physically moving around. You're sometimes you might move. It's a lot of work, and when it's done, it's a pleasure. But when during it, it's like, oh man, this is kind of an ominous project. Yeah, the last time we did this, it was so unbelievably fun.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the difference is that the last iteration, I was the only one taking the photos.
So you had fun.
No, I had to be well, I did have fun, but in order to get to fun, I had to solve all these problems. Okay, to be clear, this time it was about 400 people. I think it was
Yeah.
between 400 to 500 people, so it
Yeah.
was a smaller group. Um, so based, on the first time through, it's like, no, I think I can do this on my own, but I needed to solve a bunch of problems. And one problem is there's a lot of time wasted figuring out who a person is and getting them to fill out a card. There's wasted time taking a photo of their name. So there's a lot of wasted time in there.
Yeah.
And how can we eliminate that? And I found a software tool, a couple of tools that help solve this. And one of the tools is something called Headshot Tools, which you
Yeah.
can pay on a monthly basis. And what it does is it lets you have a beautiful interface for taking a person's, name and title, or name and email. So you can have a station in the front, for somebody to type in their name. But you know what? Since this is our sales kickoff event, I was able to get a list of the attendees as an Excel spreadsheet and preload it into the system. So now somebody could just walk up to me. I don't need somebody in
And
the front. And I say, what's your name? And it's Maria, and all of a sudden I'll see there's 5 Marias at the show, and I've seen your badge, so I know who you are. I can confirm it, and I click it, and that then talks to my software on the laptop, which was Capture One, and through some scripts. Just by clicking your name, now all the photos I take of you are going to have your name in them. So I'm going to know exactly who you are. And then, of course, I say take off your lanyards, for the photos and blah blah blah. And sometimes people didn't have the lanyard, and you ask them their name. Sometimes there are a few outliers who weren't in the system. It just takes a couple of seconds. So all of a sudden, maybe it's 5 minutes to process someone before the photo. That's all gone.
that's
So
amazing.
I was able to have fun with the people and make them laugh and get some really good photos this time around. And then the beauty of the system is, depending on how you set it up, this is for the people in the audience who might be doing something different. Depending on how you set it up, you can deliver the photos instantly. So as soon as the shoot's done, the photos can then be emailed to them. Or if you're going to do some editing after the fact, they'll get an email and they can pick the photos they want you to edit. And then it'll come back to you, and then you know which ones to edit. Or what I chose to do was just upload the photos at the end of the day. So I just queued everything up, and then at the end of the day, I pushed a button, and they all went out to everybody who was there.
That's fantastic. There's a couple of things I'm going to just double click in for
Yeah,
our audience, because
yeah,
when we're passionate about things, we talk like intensely. And so I want to
sure.
make sure that a couple of those key things you said get captured. Number one, I'll just highlight for everyone, when Roger's saying that we did 700, 400 or 1500, that's just the amount of people who took advantage of having their photograph. The events were more, when it was 400 people, there was 2,000 people there. When it was 1,500, there was 5,000 people there. It's normally about 25% of your audience, sometimes 30%, is going to take advantage of that. And so you need to plan for that. That's why we would put multiple photographers if we thought we were going to get a lot of people. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to just double click down on and re-underline for you, because it was good information, was you tried 4 or 5 different modalities of capturing the individual over multiple years, from writing a card to having a fairground ticket to taking a photograph of their lanyard. But the amount of process involved in getting them their photographs afterwards was labor intensive. And so it extended your project beyond the scope of Sales Kickoff, which is normally round up in a week. It was going well beyond that. And so what I heard you say was you you got a better situation going on with headshots of software and Capture One, all tethering it wirelessly. So pretty much it could have been instantaneous to get the person to
Mhm,
get their photographs.
mhm.
But what you did in your process was go, right, we've done a day of photography. We know who they are. I'll just stack this at the end of the night. So by the time I get into the next day, I'm at ground, I'm at zero and I can start the process again. And that really decreased your amount of time of the after production of doing it,
Absolutely,
correct?
absolutely. I personally have just had enough issues at an event where Wi-Fi doesn't work that I was uncomfortable doing everything in real time. So I just chose, let me queue it up on the computer and then send it out in a day. So that was the only reason I did that. I would have loved to have done it real time, but my fear of losing connections or sharing a connection with, 1,500 other guests was just too great.
What about sorry, I was going to say, what about keeping them excited, Roger? How do you keep them excited? Do you play music? Do you speak? How does that work?
So definitely we would have a boombox in the room playing music, but each photographer is different.
Yeah,
When we had the two stations going, we actually had four photographers and we would rotate them out because, it was labor intensive.
yeah,
And each person's got their own style. And if you have a volunteer coming in who's not, really a photographer, they're not going to get as much goodness out of the subject as somebody who is a photographer. So there's different styles. And this was the light bulb that went off for me at the very last event. So I'm glad you asked this question because for sure I didn't want to forget to say this. And what happened was I had a battery go out on one of the flashes. So while I was changing the battery, the guy who was up next for his photo was a total comedian dude. So he started doing all these really, Instagram poses. He was just going nuts and got the battery swapped out. And he came up and he did his shoot. Now, I see these other folks in the line, and they're all going to be engineer types like my dad who's going to refuse to smile.
yeah.
No matter what, my dad would refuse to smile. And, when you're doing that many people and there's engineers, you know, I program too, so I fall into there. They're not always going to smile. This is what I learned. They all tried to emulate this comedian dude. And I got the greatest photos out of these folks.
That is amazing.
So that's my takeaway is yeah, I think it was great when we did the PDF and showed examples in the room of what you could look like. But the next time I do this, I want to have a nice
A big screen or
big
something.
screen TV.
Yeah,
And we'll get our setup, we'll shoot some video of some people, just really having fun. It's like when you go to the airport and you're going through TSA.
yeah.
You'll have those silly videos that you watch. I think that would be a real big benefit. Because sometimes people come in and they're all, I don't know how to pose, or I don't know what my good side is. It's like, wow, you could just film that, a short little video and just have it looping and put the nice music to it to jazz them up.
I think that is a fantastic idea. Now, someone wants to set up a free photo booth activation in a sales kickoff. You've given them some really great advice, but if there were some takeaways that you could give to them for how they could instantly set themselves up for success with the least amount of pain, if you will, in doing that, what would you recommend?
Well, the biggest challenge is knowing who the person is and delivering the photo to them. So, um, this is just free publicity for headshot tools, but that's a great tool that you can use that solves so many of the problems. But the thing is, really, if you're doing a smaller event and you know who the guests are, don't have them fill out the card. Just print, just print the cards out. You did mention like the amusement park tickets. We did use those one year, and that was to try and limit the number of photos people are taking back to
Yeah.
when we had too many. But, have the thing printed out in advance. That way you're going to be able to read it. You just want to move the people through as quick as you can.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be the best photographer in the world, because when you're doing portraits and you get the light set up, every time you click the photo, it's going to almost be a perfect photo.
Yeah.
So sure, you might spend a little bit more time in the setup, but once you're dialed in, it's just rinse and repeat, and then you can focus on getting them to smile. But that big headache is, how do I get these photos out to the people afterwards? And you need to know which photos on the camera. Sure, taking the photo of the name is easy if it's a
Yeah.
small number, but if it's hundreds of people, you might want to write down the numbers. It can be a fun project. You just need to plan it out and have the right expectations and communicate out the right expectations to your audience.
That is fantastic. Roger, that was amazing. And thank you so very much. I'm sure there's a lot more that you can share, and we can perhaps do that in another episode. Here's what I want to tell everyone who's listening. Number one, if you want to do this with the least amount of pain, why don't you hire Roger? So he has his own company called
Let's
Adventures
do
in
it.
Video, and you can hire up Roger to do that. If you want to do it yourself, he's given you some fantastic tips here, and there will be a downloadable sheet with those, key takeaways and obviously a summary of the transcript from this episode. Please go ahead, click that like button and subscribe. But most importantly, there are email addresses in the description. So if you want to reach out to Roger directly, it's roger@goodmorningenablement.com, and, ask him questions. I know that Roger will be happy to respond to you. And with that said, I want to thank you, Roger, for giving us this insight from your expertise of doing this many, many, many times successfully.
Yep.
And just say thank you. Have a fantastic rest of your week. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.